Good afternoon. My name is Ayanna Hudson. I'm the Director of Arts Education at the National Endowment for the Arts. I wanted to welcome you to the ELI Alumni Summit Report webinar. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the National Endowment for the Arts webinar on the Education Leaders Institute Alumni Summit. My name is Ayanna Hudson. I'm the Director of Arts Education for the National Endowment for the Arts. In today's webinar, we'll provide an overview of the Education Leaders Institute, share key catalysts to advance arts education, which are featured in the report, and we'll hear from 3 participants in the Education Leaders Institute Alumni Summit whose experiences in their state teams served as the basis for the report. Before we begin, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. You are all muted and will only be able to hear us. You can submit questions or comments at any time using the Q&A box below the PowerPoint. Please do not use the raise hand button. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible during the time we have. This webinar will be posted in the podcast, webcast, and webinar section of our website in a few days, so you can refer to it in the future. So I'd like to begin by introducing our distinguished guests for this webinar. First, I'd like to introduce Diana Green, who is the Arts and Education Program Manager at the Alabama State Council on the Arts. Diana works with school systems, administrators, teachers, and artists to strategically plan, implement, and evaluate arts programs in Alabama schools. Next up, we welcome Malissa Shriver, who was appointed to the California Arts Council by Governor Schwarzenegger in 2005 and served as chair in 2009. She was also appointed by State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson to co-chair a task force on arts education. This work led to her co-founding Create California, Core Reforms Engaging Arts to Educate in California, which is a statewide initiative for arts education in public schools. Malissa is the 2014 recipient of the Arts Education Award from Americans for the Arts. And finally, we welcome Dr. June Atkinson, who is the first woman elected State Superintendent of the Public Schools of North Carolina. She has served in this position since August 2005. She oversees public instruction for almost 1.5 million students in over 2,500 public schools. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're excited to share the ELI Alumni Summit report with you, and we encourage you, if you haven't already, to go to arts.gov and to download the report. But before we engage in discussion with our participants on the findings in the report, I'd like to first give a very brief overview of the Education Leaders Institute, also known as ELI, and the ELI Alumni Summit. You know, we know a challenge facing communities across the country is how can leaders develop systemic support for arts education for all students within pre-K through 12th grade education. In 2008, the NEA launched the Education Leaders Institute to help answer this question. Bringing together executive-level, cross-sector state teams, ELI provided space to explore and debate prominent arts education issues and key questions to advance arts education, and to hear from provocative speakers who challenge current assumptions about arts and education. Over a 5-year period, teams from 29 states participated in ELI, with 8 of these teams returning to attend an ELI Alumni Summit in December 2012. The purpose of the summit was to share progress, challenges, and lessons learned, as well as deepen understanding of the critical elements necessary to advance arts education. This Education Leaders Institute Alumni Summit report illustrates the significant findings from the Arts Endowment's investment in ELI, and it assists both national and state level policymakers in understanding catalysts to advance the arts as a core element of education. Cross-sector collaboration of state-level policymakers, a laser focus on changing the systems that serve students, a sustained, coordinated effort of the state-level partners over time, and alignment of arts education with statewide priorities. So again, we encourage you to download the report at arts.gov and to read the state stories that are in the report, and these provide real-life examples for each of the catalysts to advance arts education. All of the work by Alabama, California, and North Carolina has a laser focus on systems change to ensure every student in each state receives an excellent education in the arts versus pockets of excellence for some. I'm going to ask each of our speakers to address 3 questions to share how they move this work forward. So I'm going to start with Malissa. So Malissa, I know California state team entered ELI in 2011. Can you please share what is one arts education innovation that came out of your participation in ELI?
Well, thank you, Ayana. We came home from ELI and decided we would create California, which we thought we would build into kind of a collective impact model. And many of the things that we did, which I think sustained us, where we still, to this day, I think it's almost 3 years now, 2.5 maybe, we have weekly calls every Friday at 2, and we have had a number of convenings in the state. We actually recreated our ELI speakers and event because we felt that it was more important to give people their own aha moment as opposed to coming home and telling everybody about how fabulous ELI was, and we wanted them to learn what we learned. So we had these convenings all over the state over the years, and then we have been working on a blueprint for creative education, which I believe is now in its final editing phase. We did it in a volunteer. This is one of the things I'll talk about later, but these are the challenges you face in a group that is volunteer-driven. At a certain point, we realized we needed to hire a professional editor to polish it, and so that's where it is now, and it should be ready for publication, I think this summer, last I heard. We have a number of things that grew out of our Create California, which has 4 major partners in our state: the California Arts Council, the California Department of Education, CSESA, which is the County Superintendent Association, and then also the California Alliance for Arts Education. So those were the 4 core partners. And then we have done a Turnaround Arts California, which is a partnership with the President's Committee on Arts and Humanities, came out of that. The statewide Otis report on the creative economy has come out of that. A new designation for distinguished arts schools in our state has come out of that, and a number of other things that you can't really go over in 2 minutes. But I think what's important is this idea of building consensus for sustained commitment and the challenge that brings, and how we've been able to do some of that very well, and we have had challenges in other areas.
Thank you, Malissa. I'm going to now ask Dr. Atkinson. Dr. Atkinson, your North Carolina state team entered ELI in 2008. Can you address the same question and really talk about one arts education innovation that came out of your state's participation in ELI?
Yes, thank you, Anna, and it's a privilege to be on the webinar today, and it was certainly beneficial to North Carolina for our teams to come to to participate in ELI. And one great thing is that from 2008 until now, I'm still in my position, and then Christy Ebert, who is heading our efforts in arts education, continues to provide leadership in the department. As a result of ELI in both 2008 and 2012, we have worked collaboratively among state agencies, including the Department of Public Instruction and the Department of Cultural Resources, as well as with arts organizations, professional associations, educators, community partners, and others. And our big goal is to implement a comprehensive arts education. And an aha moment for us was to be able to show how all of these different groups fit into a comprehensive arts education. And they include arts education, that would represent our teachers and our directors and curriculum specialists in that field. Then another area is arts integration. That would include not only our arts teachers, but it would also include our English, math, science, social studies teachers. And then the third component is arts exposure, and certainly all of our supportive groups with our arts organizations can see where they are in that mix. And by being able to have that comprehensive approach and to have that as a guiding principle, we have seen greater collaboration and greater support for arts education, a comprehensive arts education in our state. Most recently, our state has been focused on supporting wide-scale legislation requiring arts integration preparation for pre-service classroom teachers. And that is a huge step for our state in having a comprehensive arts education initiative. Between 2008 and 2012, we had what we call our Senate 66 Task Force. This was a joint task force co-chaired by the Department of Public Instruction staff and our Department of Cultural Resources. And that was very positive, and one of the reasons why we had that task force was that there were some champions for arts in our General Assembly, and they were able to get this bill forward in the fall. But the one arts education innovation is the comprehensive arts education approach to North Carolina, where all people can see how they fit into this initiative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Atkinson. And Diana, Alabama State team entered ELI in 2009, and please share what's one arts education innovation that came out of your state's participation in ELI.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ayanna. I do want to also say that we were very honored to have been selected to attend ELI, and to say that for Alabama, it took us twice attending ELI to get to the systemic level, but I think we're there, and that's exciting for us. The very first thing that happened with the invitation to ELI was to form a team. And I know you've explained that, but had we not even attended, that formation of that team made a critical change in our relationship to the State Department of Education. We had always had a pretty good relationship with the art specialists, but never at the higher levels of executive level. And so we actually had our deputy superintendent lead our team, and this ELI gave us the opportunity to bring him on board. We had also brought together policymakers at the time, 2 legislators, someone from the governor's staff, the art specialist at the State Department of Education, and myself. So the team itself was, for us, very innovative. But even out of that, the thing that came from that first ELI was our deputy superintendent recognizing that already in Alabama we had a priority of using distance learning to reach every student, especially at the high school level. It was an innovative program. It was something they were very proud of. And when we went to ELI, I remember one of the artists that was there kind of pointed at everyone and said, you no longer have an excuse to not bring artists into your classrooms with the opportunities of technology. And a light bulb went off for our deputy superintendent, and he said, oh, wow. So we changed our question to, how could innovative delivery systems promote broader access to arts and result in Alabama students being prepared for college, work, and life? Out of that, we put together some people who were very good at writing arts curriculum, and the university who was doing the distance learning courses, and the expert who designs those courses for all the different work made the statement that this particular design for the arts survey course in Alabama forever changed the design for all the courses in the future because of how innovative that it was. They used higher order thinking skills. They used Alabama artists. There was a lot of back and forth, and students were required to actually create and not just respond to standardized tests. And it was just a wonderful course. So that was a short-term goal, but a very successful one that came from Alabama.
Excellent. Thank you, Diana. I'd now like to ask Dr. Atkinson to address the next question and really help frame for us what was your greatest obstacle in moving forward after leaving ELI, and as importantly, how did you overcome it?
One of our greatest obstacles is probably finding time for all of the collaborative partners to collaborate and continue to move things forward. That is a challenge, but what we have tried to do to address that challenge is to have cross-sector collaboration. And what I mean by that is that different parties in the collaborative take ownership for particular pieces of their plans, and then through that shared ownership and the cross-sector collaboration, we can continue to make strides toward an equitable access to arts education as a part of a balanced and comprehensive education. And so when each partner knows how he or she fits in, and when they know that we're all moving toward the same goal of educating the whole child, then that minimizes the need to meet on a weekly or a monthly, although we do try to meet on a monthly basis, but that helps to have everyone headed toward educating the whole child. And our philosophy, and it's been accepted in our state, is that we cannot educate the whole child without having arts education.
Excellent, thank you. And Diana, I'd like to ask you to address the same question.
Well, our biggest challenge, and it was huge, was sustaining momentum. We had our new arts advisory team for the State Department of Education, but we had the same shift in politics at the time, and the legislators who had attended ELI were no longer had much of a voice in our legislature, and our governor was changed. So everyone was different, and then even our deputy superintendent, which seems like this should be a very positive thing, and it is, our deputy superintendent became our superintendent of schools. So that was fabulous in that we have a champion in the right place. However, he was extremely busy in the transition. It was very difficult to get to him, and even my own executive director was reluctant for us to go to him without something very specific. So I began to actually just start to nurture another partnership, not as far as this team was concerned, but there is an organization in Alabama called A+ Partnership for Education, which doesn't have anything to do with the arts and has everything to do with improving teaching in the schools. And it's a partnership of business and industry, and is founder of many initiatives for science and math and reading and AP courses. And I began to work or talk to the head of the Best Practices Center, Kathy Gassenheimer. So then as we had been introduced and had been talking about using the arts actually for professional development for students, the ELI Summit invitation came out, and I suddenly had a reason to go back to our superintendent and say, would you like to go back? And he said, yes, I would, but unfortunately could not because of a board meeting. So I talked to Kathy Gassenheimer at A+ Partnership Education and asked her to come with us. In the meantime, I had also helped review some other states who were applying, and I had seen the diverse stakeholders that were showing up in other teams. And I started to click in my head that we had brought policymakers because we wanted to make a difference, but we forgot about the transitional nature of that personnel and how we really needed to have business and industry on our team, and getting different partners. Now, the industry is also something that our superintendent was working with a lot for his other initiatives and did say to us, if you want to put together a team that's going to be powerful in Alabama, you're going to have to include business and industry. So we were all kind of on the same page. By the time we got back from the ELI Summit, we were ready to set up a team. And we have one now with 22 stakeholders of various different positions, and we are at the emerging level of setting up a comprehensive plan, but I'm very excited about it. It is moving forward, and we're actually following all four now, the collaboration, all of the different strategies that are necessary, because we have this wonderful report to follow and the collective impact model, and we're trying to go by that to move Alabama forward and feel very confident that we will make some progress.
Excellent. Thank you, Diana. And Malissa, I'd like to ask you to address the same question in terms of greatest obstacles in moving forward after leaving ELI, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I would say one of the first pieces is building trust among all of the partners, and I think that, you know, when you have these large state agencies all now on the same page working towards a shared goal, I think at first it seemed sort of unorthodox, and, you know, who was delegating to who and who was really in charge. And luckily for us, the Hewlett Foundation came in and funded they funded two strategic plans for us. The first with a company called PCC Helicon, which was a basic kind of governance model and strategic plan for us to begin. And then they recently funded a group called the Capital Impact Group to do a kind of an action plan, strategic plan that is coming out, I believe Friday is going to be presented. And, you know, we had 88 recommendations in this very long blueprint on arts education, 9 policy groups, which is an unwieldy thing, as you can imagine, and then almost 700 members statewide, so it grew very quickly, and yet we just got a website relatively recently. We should have probably had that a year ago. Communication, regular communication is happening, as I said, every Friday at 2 among kind of the steering committee and the policy group chairs, but the extended 700 people have not been getting regular updates, and that's a thing we needed to work on. And so, as you can imagine, and I know this wasn't one of the readings at the Alumni Summit, was about backbone organizations and how that's kind of a key thing to sustaining these collective impact groups. And we've even kind of started calling ours a radical collaboration, because that is another way to build trust, is you have to keep knocking home this idea that it is a shared leadership model. It's unusual, you know, that everybody shares in the decision making and the leadership, which, as you can imagine, slows the process down, but you have to have the buy-in. And now we're kind of on the brink of this decision: should we get a backbone organization? Should we set up a 501c3 for Create California? And it's controversial, as you can imagine, but I'm hoping that when this new capital impact strategic plan is released on Friday or early next week, there will be a lot of robust discussion around what is the proper way to move forward for us, because we have we do have a lot of momentum and a lot of accomplishments now under our belt, but we're at that phase, that kind of moment where how do we scale this and move in a kind of move past the volunteer-based organization that it has been, or not, and how far can we take it without a staff, because there's always, it requires a lot of work and at some point money, and if you can't raise money and put that into some 501c3 that's central, where is that going? Right, it's been kind of the California Arts Council funding a lot of things in the California Department of Education, and we were very, very lucky. We had the support of our state superintendent, Tom Torlakson, who has really stayed with this and been a tremendous leader on this, as have all the 4 agencies. But we are at this kind of pivotal moment, I would say, where we have to make the decision, do we go with the backbone organization? And so I do think it's very important to have these strategic planning kind of opportunities where people can air their concerns, their fears, building trust is just so key, because you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with change, you're dealing with government, there's just constant opposition and setbacks, and you have to keep the momentum going and the trust, and so the communication is so essential. And then that goes back to not having a staff or a backbone organization. Who's running the communication? Who's sending the monthly updates to all of your members statewide? So that's kind of one of I guess that I would say that would be the greatest obstacle for us.
Thank you, Malissa. I'd now like to ask Diana to talk about how do you move forward from here? What are your next steps to achieve arts education for all students across your state?
Okay, well, we are in about the 3/4 of the way through our first year with our task force that is challenged to create a comprehensive plan for arts education statewide. I feel very good about where we are right now. We were able to find common ground rather quickly under the expertise of Dawn Ellis, who the very first thing she had the team do was to define artistic and creative literacy. By the time we had gone around the table and asked everyone to define that, we discovered that everybody had common ground. And we had started already building a vocabulary that everyone could use. So we have, the one thing, when we went to the ELI Summit, we learned a lot about the design process. And we have been using that to try to muddle through. We find it very interesting, actually I've found it extremely interesting, that the arts personnel have been less likely to feel comfortable in the design process than industry has felt. Because the artists, and I really believe this to be true, we've had to fight for so long to be part of a linear way of thinking in order to make people understand us that we forget as administrators that we are artists and we can look all around in a big circle and find lots of things that are innovative. So we've had to kind of figure out, okay, what is it we really are doing, because we have very high executive level stakeholders on this team and you cannot waste their time, but how do we make sure that we get everybody working on the same ground? And one of the things we are looking at is aligning, again, a priority with a STEAM initiative. We have Boeing up in Huntsville, and someone from Boeing is on our team, and they're very much interested in team initiative or STEAM initiatives, so I'm sure that will have a part in what we're doing. We're currently brainstorming. We're in our research phase. We're establishing our common agenda. We're thinking about, we have APT at the Alabama Public Television on the task force for branding and messaging. What we really need at this point, we're discovering, is infrastructure. We think that the Arts Council here in Alabama is perfect as a backbone organization because We don't have a separate agenda. It's our mission to empower everyone else to get the work done. And we have discovered that trust is there with us. So we're not concerned about creating another organization. We feel like we have that. But we need more infrastructure to get communications moving. We need a good evaluation model. We absolutely want to work with universities once we get our goals in place as to how we will collect the information and measure everything so that we can keep things going. Our superintendent is waiting for us to give him goals and ways to measure it because he has about $600,000 to send out next year for arts education projects. That's new money. And they're very much looking forward to us giving them recommendations on how to measure the impact of that so that we'll be able to advocate for more in the future. We do see that there is a huge sense of urgency, especially because of our previous experience of losing momentum when personnel changed. We know that we have a wonderful superintendent. He is our champion, and he will support us. And he is actually moving as a major partner in this. But we got to make sure that we set up something that will be permanent and will exist after those of us who are doing this have already moved on to something else so that it will continue. So I keep emphasizing to this group of people that we are a leadership team. We are not just a task force, because a task force would come up with a plan and leave it there and then go. And then their job would be done. But this is a leadership team that we hope will maintain, sustain, and help grow arts education for many, many years to come.
Thank you, Diana. Dr. Atkinson, I'm going to ask you to address the same question and really share what are the next steps for North Carolina to achieving arts education for all students?
First, let me just explain briefly some of our accomplishments to date. One, we are collecting a great deal of state-level data. We do have legislation that defines arts as a part of the fundamentally complete program of education for all of our children. We have legislation that requires the pre-service elementary educators to be prepared to integrate the arts into their instruction. We have policy and legislation that require a standard course of study in the arts and licensure for arts educators. We are moving forward with what we call A-plus schools. They're not the same as were mentioned a little earlier, but our A-plus art schools are nationally recognized research whole school reform where the arts are central to student learning. And so one of our next steps in moving forward is to continue to find ways through our cross-sector collaboration to expand our A-plus schools. We also want to continue to use data as a driver in our decision making, and we think that's important so that we can show evidence to policymakers and to the General Assembly about the importance of comprehensive arts education. We will also be revisiting data to see how the policies and other actions that we now have in place will impact students in our schools in the state. We will, in the next few months, provide a status report update to the North Carolina State Board of Education. That's important to us to keep the comprehensive arts education in the forefront. Another is that we're going to reconvene our Senate 66 group to give them an update because they were integral in helping us move forward. And then we never can quit making sure that we find ways to align our efforts with all of our partners for cross-sector collaboration. There are many positive outcomes that we expect, and all of this really is tied to the initial ELI challenge to have access to arts education as a part of a balanced and comprehensive education for North Carolina children.
Thank you. And Malissa, I'd like to ask you to address the same question in terms of next steps for California.
Well, thank you, Ayanna. We're very focused on aligning our priorities and our action items with our blueprint. So some of the next steps that we're working on are this cross-sector collaboration, bringing in business and higher ed and these pipeline issues. We've been thinking a lot about this idea of multiple frames to talk about arts education as a social justice, kind of civil rights, equity access issue, because we find that the children in the wealthier schools and districts get it far more regularly than our students in the poorer districts. And because we have all this new state money, the Prop 30 money, which is focused on Title I students, foster care youth, and English language learners, there's new money and a new opportunity to talk about how arts education improves outcomes for those populations specifically. We're still trying to get the equity on our credentials. In California, we still don't have dance or theater credentials, which our union has been fighting us on, which is a real pity, but we're continuing to look for new ways to achieve that equity for teachers. We have put out toolkits for districts in terms of how to use their new Prop 30 money and how to address the 8 state priorities, which we feel are improved through delivery of arts education and arts integration, which includes student engagement, other student outcomes, parental involvement, school climate, so forth. So we're right in the zeitgeist of the political moment here in our state. We've been talking about reframing arts education as applied creativity, which came from Dr. James Catterall, who we love, and that has much broader implications, and people kind of understand that more. I still think we have issues around this idea of what is arts education, and is it a student holding a crayon, or is it applied creativity, and how does that apply to digital media, design, so forth. We've given the list to our governor of obstacles. We've given him some language to consider for an executive order. He specifically asked us for a list of obstacles that he could help us on, one of which was we were not in contact with our State Board of Education, which they set up very shortly after a meeting, and we presented to the State Board of Education. That was something that had not happened in the 9 years I've been working on this. Turnaround California is going to launch next week at the White House, and we are doing asset mapping around the 10 schools across our state that are going to have these turnaround schools, and we're pulling in all of the local partners, higher education institutions, businesses, local nonprofits to deliver arts integration, teacher professional development, and so forth, teaching artists. We will release the blueprint soon. We will have the new strategic plan, as I said, in probably 2 days. We'll make a decision about the backbone organization. We are doing a big project in our state on Common Core and professional development for teachers with arts education that the California Arts Council funded. That's a very exciting thing happening that came directly out of Create California. I would say that our website will continue to be refined, and our communication to our larger stakeholders in the group will come in the next, I would imagine, couple of months. We're going to have another convening either this summer or early fall. And then we've been making big inroads with and building relationships with the equity groups in our state. CASA, which is the California African American Association of State Superintendents and Administrators. We presented many times at their conference, their statewide convening. CABE, which is the California Association of Bilingual Educators. We are working with a wonderful foundation now called the Rosenthal Foundation in California, which is interested in doing a large-scale media campaign to put out, the importance of arts education and the multiple ways to frame it, and using data, to go back to June's point about data-driven, the Otis report on the creative economy, that was just only done in Los Angeles and Orange counties, and the California Arts Council gave them a grant to take that statewide, and that's a much more helpful advocacy tool, as you can imagine. And so building up the data, where is the arts education being delivered, where is it not being delivered, and then also we've been building relationships with researchers all over the country. We had a large creativity symposium that West Staff sponsored with the California Arts Council, where we brought researchers from all over the world on creativity to discuss the newest cutting-edge information, research, get that out there. And many of them approached us afterwards and said, we would love for you to use us for op-eds, for any advocacy you need. We don't want our research to sit on a shelf. And so now we're doing a major op-ed campaign, timing it to the release of Turnaround Arts, but pairing famous artists, Frank Gehry, Tim Robbins, Russell Simmons, people like that, Yo-Yo Ma, with famous researchers. And so that's a very exciting thing. James Catterall, Mark Runco, Dr. Robert Root Bernstein, we're pairing these researchers with famous artists to do massive op-eds statewide. So that's a good little agenda right there.
Thank you. Thank you, Malissa. You know, it is so exciting for me to hear how the four catalysts to move arts education forward are really fundamentally embedded in the work of these three states. And here at the NEA, we are also embracing the four catalysts to advance arts education. We've just launched a new arts education strategic plan, which is guiding the NEA's investments and priorities. Our four goals are leverage our investments for deeper impact, drive a national data and research agenda, and we've heard a lot of conversation about data this afternoon, collaborate for collective impact, and provide leadership for the field of arts education. So we encourage you to read more about the strategic plan in the ELI Alumni Summit report, and how the framework of collective impact, which many of our speakers referenced this afternoon, which is really a group of stakeholders and organizations from different sectors creating solutions to difficult problems, and how collective impact is really directly aligned with the four catalysts in the report. To leverage our investments for deeper impact, the NEA now has a new project type. Collective impact projects are intended to ensure that all students across entire schools, school districts, and/or states, and communities of all sizes participate in the arts over time. We anticipate making a limited number of grants at higher award levels for longer-term, large-scale projects. So we encourage you to go to our website to review our guidelines. For those of you who may already be immersed in this work, and for those of you who are planning or thinking about collective impact efforts, we want to hear from you. So we invite you to share your stories with us at collectiveimpact@arts.gov. So in the time that we have left, we'd like to address as many questions for our guest speakers as we can. So our first question, we've heard from each of our speakers this afternoon really address elements of building consensus for sustained commitment. And this is whether it's gaining trust of partners, whether it's dealing with turnover, or even, finding time to partner. And given these realities, I'd like to first ask Diana, can you talk about, what specific role do you play in sustaining the commitment of partners, given that there are a lot of challenges, as you all have talked about, a lot of challenges in building consensus for sustained commitment. But what role do you play in addressing some of those challenges, in your specific role as Arts Education Manager at the Alabama State Arts Council?
Okay, thanks, Ayanna. I think the thing that I have allowed to guide me is what I learned many years ago at an Arts Education Partnership meeting when we were all in Dallas, Texas, and we were learning about big thought. And I remember hearing, if you're going to make this happen, one person has to drive it. So I don't think of myself as doing the work, but I do think of myself as being the driver. I'm the one that continues to nudge and push and say, okay, you were going to do that, where is it? That kind of thing. So And I've really enjoyed the work because it has put me in relationship with people I would never get to talk to otherwise. These people are exciting. I love listening. I'm learning to be a listener more than a talker. And I just see myself as facilitating and making it possible for everyone else, all these other organizations and stakeholders, to make a difference in Alabama. And I feel like if I can make that happen and we can set something up, that I will have achieved my career goal in life. That's pretty much where I am. I do think that if I were not in doing that, and it has taken a great deal of effort to stay on top of it, I will say, if there weren't someone doing that, I don't think it would happen. That backbone organization that it talks about in collective impact, I think is key. We had lots of ideas and lots of enthusiasm, and it started out great, but without keeping that momentum going, it could easily falter. So that's my job, is to not let it falter.
Thank you. I want to ask a question about data, because I heard many of our guest speakers this afternoon really mention data collection efforts. And Dr. Atkinson, specifically, I know you talked about efforts in North Carolina to collect statewide data on arts education. And this also addresses the question of, urgency and how does one create urgency and to act and to move arts education forward. And so I'd like you just to address briefly, what types of data have you collected in North Carolina and how have you used that data? Because it's one thing to say we've collected data, but if you could talk a little bit about, what types of specific data you collected and how did you even go about collecting data across your entire state?
Our state has a tradition of collecting statewide data about what our schools offer and how many students are enrolled. So in terms of arts education data, we collect information about the number of classes and the number of students for each of the arts disciplines, and that informs our practice and policy. We also know that there are areas, we know through this data collection, the areas where we have the highest numbers of classes and students and at which levels, and that allows us to make decisions or recommend policy based on information rather than our having to rely on hearsay. And we know from our collection that approximately 92% of our students in elementary school are a part of physical arts and music. And we also know that we don't have those same high numbers for theater and dance. And so that gives us an opportunity to look at ways that we can work through cross-sector collaboration to ensure that we address those needs of the students. We also collect data as a part of accountability with our A-plus schools, and we know how those schools are doing compared to other schools that would not have the same research base. That also helps us to sell the whole notion of moving toward more A-plus schools, because we can show that the investment or the outcomes are worth the investment in those schools. We also collect data about how our institutions of higher education are meeting the North Carolina's pre-service arts integration requirement, and of course that helps us to determine the types of professional development and support that we need to give our arts educators, our administrators, and even our institutions of higher education. We use these data to share with our collaborative partners. They want to make decisions based on data, and so consequently having all these data available really contributes to our moving to even a better place for comprehensive arts education.
Thank you, Dr. Atkinson. I have a question for Malissa. So Malissa, you mentioned that you've reached out to notable individual artists such as Frank Gehry. Are there plans to collaborate with the creative industries And the participant on the webinar who's asking this question is noting that California is filled with film, video games, social media, etc., industries that rely on creativity, as well as, it says, Apple, Google, Disney, etc. Can you talk a little bit about plans to collaborate with these creative industries?
Sure. Well, I can make it. We've been working with, for instance, on Turnaround Arts, which I consider to be a major project coming out of Create California. We are talking to Adobe in terms of doing content in the turnaround schools and to be a partner on Create California. We've been talking to Apple in terms of content and their foundation work in this area. We have the support and partnership of Sony Studios, DreamWorks. Let me think. Gosh, there's a whole lot of creative industries, including the art colleges like Otis, Art Center. We feel that that's a very important frame for our state, the creative economies, and all kind of aspects of design. In fact, Frank Gehry, who I actually work with now, his sister Doreen Nelson has been doing design-based learning, teaching doing professional development for teachers for 30 years, and now of course people are talking about this project-based learning, design-based learning as it's a different kind of learning. And when we're talking about the creative industries, whether it be fashion, toy design, automotive design, digital media, video gaming, as you referenced, is one of the top growth industries in our state. How do we educate those kids, and how do you reframe arts education so that people see that it's the same thing you're talking about? It's not just orchestra, it's all of that. And it's discrete arts education, all four disciplines, and arts integration to make the connections between the other core subject matter. So we're definitely partnering with the creative industries and have been. That's been a real focus for Create California. Boeing, all these companies that were interested in our work early on and continue to be, and now are playing out as partners in Turnaround Arts.
Thank you, Malissa. And Diana, we have a question for you as well. What industries are involved in your initiative? During your presentation, you mentioned Boeing. Are there other industries that are involved in the work taking place in Alabama?
You have to give me we're, actually we have representation of business through the Business Council. So, and we have retired executives giving us perspective on industry, but I believe right now Boeing is the main industry that's on board. We are, however, we just started, and we wanted to keep our team small enough to really get a lot done to begin with. We didn't open it up really large, but we are at the point now in our last meeting where we decided we had to have key partners. And so we have all of our members going out and recruiting more partnerships to this effort. I did, this isn't business, but we have a Black Belt Community Foundation that has agreed to come on board. And also, we already had personnel from the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, but they have agreed to be a key partner as well. So we do have a real estate organization in Eufaula. So, we do have business involved. It was difficult to get a balance because we had so many arts people that absolutely had to be involved because they'd been working so long. So we did feel we were leaning a little in the art direction, but we're thinking about balancing in the other direction. The other thing that I didn't talk about that was identified right away that we're really working on is getting student voice onto our team. So we hope by September to have a little nucleus of students that are at least 2, maybe 4, that are part of the team that can actually work with us and help us design the plan. So we're not designing for someone who doesn't have a voice in what we're doing. Did that
Thank
help?
you. No, that was great. Thank you. And Dr. Atkinson, we have a question for you. Someone is asking if you can share your thoughts about professional development for teachers already in the field. I know that you talked about the policy for the requirement for pre-service teachers in North Carolina, which is very exciting. Can you talk about professional development for teachers already in the field?
Hi, Ayanna. This is Christy Lynch-Ebert, and I'm speaking on behalf of Superintendent Atkinson. She just got pulled into another meeting, but I can answer that question if you would like.
Please, thank you.
Okay. So professional development for existing arts educators, was that what the interest was, or the question?
Yes, Dr.
Okay, so we do a
Atkinson
lot of
talked about.
partnering with our professional organizations. We have 6 different professional organizations in across each of the separate arts disciplines in North Carolina. So we do a lot with partnering with them, communicating and serving ex officio with their boards to help plan professional development for teachers and to provide the support that they need in the specific disciplines. I'm leading this webinar, and we're doing a North Carolina Race to the Top Arts Education Leaders webinar immediately following this at 3:30 today. So we do regular webinars for leaders. We have an arts education think tank that works on statewide initiatives and helps address the needs of the field. For example, providing support in educator effectiveness and with tools that will help students with taking ownership for their learning. We also work with arts education coordinators, which are our LEA staff across the state, central office coordinators, and they meet twice a year and talk about arts education issues, have professional development, brainstorm strategies for how they can implement arts policies in their districts and how different districts are handling things as they come along, implementing the standards, that kind of thing. And then we also just try to be very accessible through our resources. We have a wiki site where we post all of our standards and standard support materials. We have a Facebook page, which we just established recently, a Twitter account. We do monthly Twitter chats with people in the field. So those are the kinds of things that we do to provide that ongoing support.
Thank you. And with the time that we have left, we have time for one more question. And Malissa, you mentioned that building trust among the groups was a challenge and an obstacle that you were working to overcome. We have a participant on the webinar who's asking if you can expand upon that and to really briefly address, where does the distrust exist?
Well, it's funny. I don't want to make it sound like it was a paranoid group of people, because it wasn't really like that. It was more, I think, the California Alliance for Arts Education was already doing this work, and I think at some level they must have thought, well, what is Create California, and what would you be doing that would be any different than what we're doing? Or the California Arts Council, which was, doing about 40 to 50% of its grant making in arts education, suddenly is very involved in arts education, and I think there were people who thought, well, how much should the Arts Council really be doing in this? And the California Department of Education, is obviously all about this, but this was a new kind of hybrid project to come out of the Department of Education, and that's, again, why I keep wanting to commend our State Superintendent, Tom Torlakson, for continuing to push, and also our Deputy Superintendent, who really, they stayed with it, and they assigned staff to cover that. We have staff who organize the weekly calls, do the agendas. That was a decision made at the highest levels of CDE. Now, that could have gone either way, and CESA, is key in kind of connecting all the county superintendents to what we're doing, because these are leadership decisions that have to be made at district levels. And so there wasn't really, I guess I don't want to misrepresent that there was mistrust, but I think when you bring a lot of state agencies together who had not really worked in a collective impact fashion before, there were questions about, well, who's delegating to who? Well, who's really in charge? Well, who's setting the agenda? Who should be doing what? And that kind of thing took some time, just as any relationships do, building relationships, phone calls, meetings. And then when you start realizing that, like, ooh, I have a good idea for you, here's a funder who is interested in this, and, it's not, I guess it's hard to get out of that feeling, which is very much, I only have a little bit, that poverty consciousness, to like, let's bring the tide up so all of our ships are higher. That was an important idea to get across, and it took time and it took relationship building, and I think we're in a much stronger position than we were before. It's just when a big decision comes up, like now this will be a very big decision, should we do a backbone organization and set up a 501c3, and then that's a very decision. How will that impact the other organizations? Then will the other organizations still be in charge, or will this other organization, do you see what I mean? Those kind of decisions and shifts of power, or the perception of power shifting, can be, you have to tread mindfully through these things.
Thank you, Malissa. This wraps up our Q&A session of the webinar. On the screen is information you will need to download our ELI Alumni Summit report. We hope that you sign up for our newsletter and stay connected with our ongoing work here at the NEA's Arts Education Office. Thanks again to our featured guests, as well as to the wonderful Arts Education team here at the NEA. We hope you enjoyed our webinar today. Look for the archive webinar to be posted on our website in a few weeks, and look for our next newsletter as well. Thank you so much. Goodbye.